Have you ever noticed how once someone points out a pattern, you suddenly see it everywhere? It's like your brain was operating on autopilot, and then someone flips a switch, and suddenly reality looks completely different. Today, we're going to explore one of the most powerful psychological mechanisms that governs human behavior. And once you understand it, you'll never look at your own decisions the same way again. This isn't about tricks or hacks. This is about understanding why awareness itself becomes the catalyst for change, and why most people remain stuck simply because they have yet seen what's right in front of them. Let's start with a simple observation about how the human mind works. Your brain processes millions of pieces of information every single day, but you're only consciously aware of a tiny fraction of that data. This isn't a flaw in your design, it's actually a survival mechanism. If you had to consciously process every single stimulus around you, every sound, every movement, every sensation, you'd be completely overwhelmed within minutes. So your brain filters. It decides what's important and what can be ignored. It creates patterns, shortcuts, and automatic responses. And most of the time, this system works beautifully. But here's where things get interesting. The moment you become aware of a pattern, your brain can't go back to ignoring it. You've essentially updated the filter, and now that information gets priority access to your conscious mind. Think about the last time you learned a new word. It was an unusual term you'd never heard before. And then, within the next few days, you heard that same word 3 or 4 times in completely different contexts. Did the world suddenly start using that word more often? Of course not. The word was always there, being used at the same frequency as before. What changed was your awareness. Your brain's filtering system now recognized that word as significant, so it started flagging it whenever it appeared. This is called the frequency illusion, and it demonstrates a fundamental truth about human cognition. We don't see reality as it is, see reality as we are programmed to see it. Now let's apply this concept to financial behavior, because this is where the pattern becomes impossible to ignore once you see it. Most people go through life making the same financial decisions over and over again, never questioning why they do what they do. They spend money on things that provide temporary satisfaction. They avoid thinking about long-term consequences.
Yes.
They follow the crowd without examining whether the crowd is actually heading somewhere worth going. And then one day something shifts. Maybe they read something. Maybe they have a conversation. Maybe they experience a financial setback that forces them to pay attention. And suddenly, they see the pattern. They see how their daily choices compound over time. They see how small inefficiencies add up to massive opportunity costs. They see how the temporary comfort of avoiding difficult decisions creates permanent limitations in their future options. This moment of awareness is incredibly powerful, but it's also uncomfortable. Because once you see the pattern, you can't pretend it doesn't exist anymore. You can't go back to autopilot. Every time you make a financial decision, you're now consciously aware of what you're choosing and what you're giving up. You see someone buying an expensive coffee every single morning, and you can't help but calculate the annual cost and what that money could become if invested over a decade. You see people financing depreciating assets, and you understand exactly how that decision will impact their financial flexibility for years to come. You see the difference between people who think about money in terms of immediate gratification versus those who think in terms of future capability, and the divergence becomes crystal clear. But here's what makes this phenomenon even more interesting. Awareness doesn't just change what you see. It changes what you do. This is the part that most people don't fully grasp. They think awareness is just about knowledge, about understanding concepts intellectually. But true awareness creates an internal tension that demands resolution. When you see a pattern clearly and you understand the consequences of that pattern, continuing the same behavior becomes psychologically uncomfortable. It's like driving a car while knowing there's a problem with the brakes. Sure, you could keep driving, but every moment behind the wheel feels different because you know something is wrong. This is why financial education, when done correctly, isn't about memorizing rules or strategies. It's about shifting perspectives so completely that old behaviors become impossible to maintain. Consider someone who finally understands compound interest on a deep level. It's not just the mathematical formula, but the real-world implications of time and consistency. Once that understanding clicks, the entire relationship with money transforms. Suddenly, every dollar carries weight. Every month that passes without investing feels like a missed opportunity. Every inefficient purchase gets mentally compared against its future value. The person hasn't necessarily learned new information. They've simply started seeing reality through a different lens. And that new lens makes certain behaviors feel illogical and certain behaviors feel inevitable. Now, let's talk about why most people never experience this shift in awareness, even when they're exposed to the same information repeatedly. The answer lies in attention and emotional relevance. Your brain doesn't just filter based on what it knows, it filters based on what it cares about. Information that feels abstract or disconnected from your immediate experience gets deprioritized. This is why someone can read about long-term wealth-building principles and feel completely unmoved. It's why people can hear statistics about retirement savings and still not change their behavior. The information exists, but it hasn't been connected to their personal reality in a way that triggers genuine awareness. This is also why personal financial setbacks often become turning points. When you experience the direct consequences of poor financial decisions, the information stops being abstract. It becomes emotionally relevant. Your brain suddenly upgrades that information from background noise to critical data. Once that happens, you start seeing the pattern everywhere. You recognize the same mistakes in your past behavior. You notice other people making similar choices. You understand the mechanics of how financial outcomes are created, and that understanding becomes impossible to ignore. But here's the good news. You don't have to wait for a crisis to trigger this awareness. You can deliberately cultivate it by changing how you engage with information. Instead of passively consuming financial content, you can actively apply it to your own life. You can run the numbers on your own decisions. You can project forward and see where your current trajectory leads. You can compare your approach to people who've achieved the results you want and identify the specific differences in behavior and mindset. This process of active engagement forces your brain to prioritize the information, to make it emotionally relevant, and to integrate it into your decision-making framework. Let's look at a specific example of how this plays out in real life. Imagine two people with similar incomes and similar expenses. Person A lives month to month, spending what they earn and occasionally going into debt for larger purchases. Person B has somehow developed an awareness of financial patterns. They see their income as a tool for building future capability, not just funding current lifestyle. They recognize that every dollar spent now is a dollar that can't work for them later. They understand that the difference between wealthy and struggling isn't usually income level. It's behavior patterns repeated consistently over time. Person A isn't making bad choices because they're unintelligent or irresponsible. They're making those choices because they genuinely don't see the pattern. Their brain's filter hasn't been updated to recognize the long-term implications of daily decisions. But person B can't unsee what they've learned. Every spending decision gets filtered through this new awareness, and the cumulative effect over years and decades becomes enormous. This is why awareness is often described as the first step toward change, but that description doesn't capture the full picture. Awareness isn't just the first step. It's the foundational shift that makes every other step possible. Without it, people can try to follow budgets or investment strategies, but they're doing it mechanically, without understanding why. And when behavior is mechanical, it's fragile. As soon as willpower fades or circumstances change, the old patterns return. But when behavior flows from genuine awareness, it becomes self-reinforcing. You're not forcing yourself to make better decisions. You're making them because the alternative now feels illogical once you've seen the pattern. There's also a social dimension to this that's worth exploring. Once you develop awareness of financial patterns, you start noticing them in the people around you. You see friends making choices that you know will lead to predictable outcomes. You see family members repeating cycles that could easily be broken with different decisions. And this creates an interesting challenge, because you can't transfer awareness to someone else. You can share information, you can explain concepts, you can show examples. But until the other person's brain makes that information emotionally relevant and updates its filtering system, they won't see what you see. They'll hear your words, maybe even agree with them intellectually, but they won't experience the shift that changes behavior. This is why the most valuable thing you can do for someone isn't to give them advice, it's to help them develop their own awareness. Ask questions that make them think, create scenarios that make abstract concepts concrete, help them connect information to their personal experience in a way that triggers genuine insight. Because once that moment of awareness happens, they won't need your advice anymore. They'll see the patterns themselves, and their behavior will shift naturally as a result. Now, let's address something important. This concept of awareness changing behavior isn't about perfectionism or never making mistakes. It's about understanding causality clearly enough that your decisions become more intentional. Even after you see the pattern, you'll still make choices that prioritize present enjoyment over future benefits sometimes. But those choices will be conscious, not understand the trade-off you're making. Won't lie to yourself about what's happening. That clarity prevents the accumulation of unconscious inefficiencies that slowly erode financial progress over time. Think about it this way. For awareness, most financial decisions happen in a fog. People react to immediate circumstances without seeing the broader picture. They optimize for short-term comfort without calculating long-term cost. They follow social norms without questioning whether those norms serve their goals. After awareness, the fog lifts. You might still make the same decision occasionally, but you do it with eyes open, understanding exactly what you're choosing and why. This shift from unconscious reaction to conscious choice is what separates people who gradually build wealth from people who remain perpetually struggling despite having adequate income. The pattern we've been discussing applies far beyond just finance, of course. Once you understand how awareness works, you start seeing it everywhere, in health decisions, in relationship dynamics, in career choices, in how people spend their time and energy. The mechanism is always the same. Most people operate on autopilot, following patterns they've never examined. Then something triggers awareness. They see the cause and effect relationship clearly. And once they see it, they can't go back to unconscious behavior. The awareness itself becomes the intervention that changes outcomes. So what does this mean for you right now watching this video? If what we've discussed resonates with you, if it's made you more aware of patterns in your own life, then you've just experienced exactly what we've been describing. Your brain has updated its filter. Information that might have seemed abstract before now feels personally relevant. In moving forward, you'll notice things you didn't notice before. You'll see patterns in your decisions. You'll recognize the long-term implications of daily choices. You'll understand why some people progress while others stagnate, and it won't be a mystery anymore. You'll see it clearly. The question becomes what you do with that awareness, because seeing the pattern is just the beginning. The real transformation happens when you let that awareness guide your behavior consistently over time. When you stop making excuses for choices you know are inefficient. When you align your actions with your understanding of how outcomes are actually created. When you accept that financial success isn't complicated or mysterious, it's the natural result of specific behaviors repeated consistently. And those behaviors flow naturally from clear awareness of the patterns that govern results. This is the insight that changes everything, not because it's complex, but because it's true. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Your relationship with money, with time, with decision-making itself shifts permanently. You move from reacting to circumstances to consciously creating outcomes. You stop being confused about why some people achieve financial security while others struggle. See the exact behaviors that produce different results. But you understand that you have complete control over which pattern you choose to follow. Remember, awareness is the switch that can't be unflipped. What you now understand about patterns, behavior, and long-term consequences will filter every financial decision you make from this point forward. Use that wisely. Let it guide you toward choices that serve your future self, not just your present comfort. And recognize that this awareness is one of the most valuable assets you can develop, because it compounds just like interest, making every future decision slightly better, and those improvements add up to dramatically different outcomes over time. If this video helped you see something differently, if it created that moment of awareness we've been discussing, make sure to like it so more people can experience the same shift. Drop a comment sharing what pattern you're now seeing that you couldn't see before, and subscribe because we'll continue exploring the principles that actually create financial progress, cutting through the noise to focus on what genuinely matters. The pattern is there. Now you see it. And that changes everything.